everybody. Welcome to the Celigo Technology Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Tenenbaum, the social media manager over here at Celigo. Today, we are joined by my co-host, Mark Simon, who's our vice president of strategy, as well as Erik, Kaiser, the CEO of Orderful, and Piers McDonald, the CTO of Orderful. Pleasure to have you guys on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jordan.
Absolutely. Well, we might as well jump right into it. I'll start with you, Erik, and Piers. You can feel free to answer this question after once Erik goes. But you guys have been in the EDI space for quite some time, and I'm kind of curious if you could just tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to becoming the CEO of Orderful.
Yeah, that's right. So, my background starts in the trenches of EDI. Right out of university, I got a degree in informatics, which is essentially computer science with business. Started my career as a consultant in Chicago, and the first projects I was working on were EDI projects. And I was just surprised, I learned so much about modern technology in school, and then was asked to build flat file integrations between, like a meat manufacturer and Walmart, and was kind of like blown away with how kind of legacy the tech was and how the supply chain operated. Fast forward a few years after that, I ended up realizing I could make some money in the space, started my own consulting firm, a company called Doppio Group. We focused on the Infor ERP market, and all we did was build EDI integrations and then other API integrations. And as I was doing that, I started to recognize that, the biggest challenge with EDI was all about efficiency to onboard new partners and efficiency to solve problems. Really understand what the problems were and figure out how to solve them quickly. And so I took another kind of leap and had this idea that I could build a platform that brought EDI partners together in days or even seconds. And that was kind of the impetus of starting Orderful. That was back in 2017. Been working on Orderful for about 7 years now. The last 15 years have been hyper focused on EDI, and what we're doing at Orderful is, we built a software platform that's not only bringing partners together in days and kind of, executing against that vision of making EDI connections really easy and fast, but also enabling companies to solve problems in minutes and seconds. So, kind of really taking advantage of this legacy market and putting a really modern spin on top of, something that's been around for the last 40, 50 years.
That's fantastic. I think that's what a lot of businesses and brands are sorely lacking. And Piers, can you tell us just a little bit about how you got to where you are and maybe your role in such a transformative EDI company like Orderful?
Absolutely. I can't speak as well. I'm not going to beat Erik's description of kind of the genesis of Orderful, but I can start my story. I'm going to go back even further. It's the 1980s, and my parents just got a Commodore 64 for our basement. I don't remember much except there was brown shag carpeting. I could vaguely tell you the layout of the room, but I remember that Commodore, and I was hooked. Early on, I knew I loved computers and computing and software. If it asked me
You're such a dork. You sure you want to share all that?
Hey, it's we've had a revolution. Geeks have inherited the earth, right?
That's right.
Okay. I can be open and proud about it.
Yeah.
Mid 90s, if you'd asked me, what do you want to do? I would have been like, I want to work at Microsoft, the hottest, the coolest software company in the world, and I want to make video games. And then I went on. I got a comp sci degree, did the usual stuff. I started my career in telecom, doing nothing near that. I was doing complex order fulfillment and integration. As telecoms are like the industry is the amalgamation of many smaller regional telecommunication providers gobbling each other up, and so tons of complex systems being integrated together. And then eventually I went on from there, and I achieved my dream for 2012, and I worked at Microsoft building video games. But sometimes, your dreams aren't what they aren't all that you imagine them to be. Published a few Xbox games, but realized I'd rather not see how the sausage is made, and I'm happy to play them. Didn't want to be in the industry, and I thought I'd go back to kind of boring software. And that's how I found, shortly after, met Erik, and he told me about the Orderful vision, which was all of that kind of stuff of like, it aligned with like back-end systems and order fulfillment, which was, my bread and butter I'd done for years up to that point. And his idea of modernizing an important problem was huge, spoke to me massively, because it wasn't a solution looking for a problem. He had this massive problem, and he had convinced people to purchase this product that didn't exist yet. And I remember one of the first things he said is, "Hey, we have to build this." And I'm like, "Whoa! You have people that that have signed up for it, and this problem is so big, and you haven't even built it. I'm in. That is a real problem that people need solved, and for all the reasons Erik just mentioned." And that was 5 years ago, over 5 years ago. And like you mentioned, I'm the CTO. I run the engineering team and have helped us build the platform that we have today. And that's me. That's my involvement in Orderful.
Well, that's awesome. Appreciate you both giving us a little bit of background. And I will say, in all 10 episodes, that's the second time we've had a Commodore mentioned on the podcast. So I hope this is a continuing thread. I will keep track as long as that happens.
Wow. That's it. Wasn't the size of the problem, the EDI problem that I gravitated to, was the Commodore 64, because I had one in the 80s. So I was like, hey,
that was an important machine. Yeah,
that's really funny. So just with that in mind, in terms of, we're talking about Commodores, we're talking about legacy systems that you guys have kind of helped revolutionize. Let's kick this off into the EDI space, and then Mark will kind of hopefully swing around with some more poignant questions, because I know he's an expert at that. But why hasn't EDI changed? Like, what is so legacy about? And you can go into the weeds, or you can keep it as surface level as you want. But why is it something that seems so stuck in the past?
Actually, before the guys answer that, let's even take it a step further, because some of our audience I know is familiar with EDI. They've heard of it, but they don't work with it every day. And especially if they're not a product-based company in certain verticals, they may never have interfaced with it. I'd love to just start there. Like, what is EDI in 90 seconds for everybody? Because it's kind of one of those things that gets thrown around, and not necessarily everybody really understands what it is.
Yeah, right on. I mean, EDI is it's a way of integrating supply chain data with your supply chain. And there are, it's a concept. It's not a protocol. It's not a standard. It stands for electronic data interchange. And it's a kind of suggestion of how to integrate data with your supply chain partners. It applies to not only retail. So, a lot of the Sligo audience would probably be merchants or brands, right? It applies to brands. Yep. It applies in healthcare. It applies in the financial vertical. It applies also really heavily in logistics between shippers and carriers and 3PLs. So it's spread across almost every industry, and it's a suggestion on how to integrate. There are two major standards. In North America, we have the ANSI X12 standard, and in Europe, there's a standard called EDIFACT. But essentially what it is it's, these kind of published suggestions of how to handle integrated transactions like a purchase order or an invoice or an ASN. And the real challenge with it is that everyone has their own flavor of what a transaction could look like, right? Because these are just suggestions. So for example, if you're a merchant integrating with Walmart, Costco, and Amazon, each one of those big buyers or wholesalers has their own unique flavor of EDI. And you're going to be integrating a unique version of a purchase order with Walmart, purchase order with Costco, purchase order with Amazon, and none of that's going to be the same. And so the challenge is really for the merchant or the brand, in this case, you have to build custom integrations to every partner in your supply chain to handle all of the different types of EDI integrations. And that's what I saw as like a EDI developer in the trenches was I thought I was decent at writing code, but it took me a very long time to get that job done. What I experienced is it took about a quarter, maybe 2 quarters to, integrate data with Walmart. I mean, it wasn't the technology side of it. It was really kind of the people and process side of it that that got really challenging.
That's a great explanation, Eric. Now, the way you described that as this EDI is this standard for businesses to communicate electronically, automate data between them. This sounds really forward thinking and modern, right? Is EDI cutting edge? Sounds like it's just this very modern thing that's only developed in the last few years, or what?
So it's been around. It predates the internet. So it's been around before the internet was created, and when it came out, it was an extremely modern concept, right? Like, how do we send and receive highly dense amounts or packets of information, and then parse that information, understand what we're looking at, and all that, like I said, was done over telephone. As the internet matured, and things like web browsers and FTP servers and all this technology came out, the technology had a chance to advance, and it never really did, right? Like, the thing that's crazy about EDI is, like, a lot of the principles that were created 50 years ago are still the core principles of the solution today. Maybe some of the fringe technology around how data is exchanged has changed, like, a communication channel like an AS2 server or an API. But a lot of the core kind of principles of the format of the data and the structure all relatively remains the same.
It's fantastic. Appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying. And that answers my question why EDI hasn't changed, because it's been around for 50, 60 years and it's kind of stuck in its old ways.
I think the other part of that is, like, it's everybody has it. So, like, since it's been around for so long, every company has adopted some version of EDI. So since it's kind of everywhere, there's been no reason for it to change. And then, if you look at, like, enterprises actually hiring technical resources to do work, it's really hard for a brand to hire, like, a technologist. So they hire a consultant. Consultants have done the EDI work, and it becomes very easy for EDI to continue to be the core way of exchanging information.
So from a leadership perspective from you, Eric, and from a technology perspective from you, Piers, what are you building? What's next? What's the future in terms of whether Orderful or EDI in general?
So I'll give some roadmap, some hints at the roadmap of, like, some of the things we've released this year and then what's coming. Our core value prop is there, and we're really excited about that. Like, that's actually been the most rewarding thing for me as a CEO with the vision of solving this problem, is actually seeing us solve the problem for our customers, which is taking the amount of time it takes to go live with a new partner from a quarter down to less than 2 weeks. So now that that's there, as a company, we've been focused on growth. And with growth comes, releasing new features that expand our total addressable market. So we've released, a new feature called Edifact, where we can now service the whole European and Asia Pacific regions with EDI. And then we're going to start going down market with new features that enable us to, sell to smaller companies, like make EDI more self-serviceable for brands or merchants that maybe can't integrate data. So that's kind of where we're going from like a go-to-market perspective. But I'll let Piers take the product stuff, because I do think we have some really cool product things coming out, or really cool engineering things coming out. In particular, AI. We've implemented some AI into our platform. But yeah, Piers.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say technology-wise, like there's been kind of two big pillars we've tackled the EDI problem. The first is modernization. So with all this, everything Eric mentioned about these standards, coming around 50, 60 years ago, old stuff works, right? It's there's a reason like that we're still on, and we kind of covered that. But for your modern developer, it's not very familiar. A lot of these standards started in a totally different environment. Memory was $10,000 a meg. as opposed to being pennies now. So you'll see things like the beginning of an order. You don't say beginning of purchase order. You say beg, BEG, because when memory amounts are so small and so pricey, every single bit and byte matters. And so it's very terse. And your modern developer, if you have a developer that's out of school, got a few years experience or an intermediate, maybe 24, 25 years old, they haven't seen those kind of flat files and those kind of those things in years. Those constraints have been gone for some time. So what we're trying to do is by modernizing it, is meet people and meet the developers of today and the people having EDI problems today in a technology space they're familiar with. Using JSON instead of flat files as a medium of data exchange, using a RESTful API instead of FTP or AS2 or any of these older communication protocols that are from the 80s, 90s, that kind of stuff. Make it natural and intuitive to exchange data. But that's I don't see anyone could do it. It wasn't trivial, but plastering a modern thing in front of old tech is only half of it. The next thing, as Eric mentioned, is how do we actually get to some of the more core problems of what makes EDI hard. Yes, the older nature of it makes it a little less unintuitive, but even once you understand all that, there's still some challenges. And so those big ones are a lot of it's a process. As much as EDI is technology, it's a process. So it is, and it's because it's different from every single retailer. Everyone you trade with, you have to take different steps and go back and forth. So it's adding workflow and guidance and helping people, because as much as folks want the technology, they often want just help understanding what they're supposed to do. You score this big contract, you're selling into Walmart, you're like, yeah, this is it. We've made it to the big times. And then it's like, EDI, what the heck am I doing? So guiding people through that process with product has been a big transformational thing. And then the next bit is that we're looking at, as Eric alluded to there, is the translation between them. Everyone does EDI a little bit differently. They all use slightly different, their data within the same data structure. They still speak that a little bit differently. Just like we can, people can speak English. And you'd be using the same language, but you go from Louisiana to Glasgow, Scotland to somewhere on the West Coast, and it sounds a little bit different, almost to the point on the extremes of being unintelligible. So what we're doing is we're looking to automate that translation away using some of the more exciting stuff is getting into LLMs and training models, because we've got a good years now of data that we can use and say, no, Walmart needs to look like this. And so we can just take the payloads and predict the transformation that needs to happen. And that's kind of like the last stage, I'd say, of really solving the EDI problem.
That's awesome.
That's interesting, Piers. So did I hear it correctly? You're using the AI and some of those generative AI model tools to do predictive mapping, then to map from your map into the trading partner specific EDI document version.
Exactly. So this is a beta feature to keep in mind. But for since the inception, we've had a no-code environment we refer to as a rules engine that helps allows anyone to do this kind of trading partner specific mapping. And now the best it's enabled. It's a very popular feature and enable people with no programming background to transform their data to meet the requirements of their trading partners. If you haven't seen it, it's kind of like Excel-like syntax, right? If bracket this, but the best rule is the one you don't have to write. And so we're using AI models based off of the data we see, the historical data we've trained it with, and the guidelines we need to match, predict the rule and that data transformation that needs to happen.
Oh, that's really cool. That's Mark and I talk about AI a lot here, and that's definitely not a use that we've come across before. Kind of like predictive, feeling like I'm doing it with my fingers, but I guess like matching of mapping. Thank you. I don't know. I couldn't come to my brain. I have a question, because something that I see a lot of overlap, and I'm not the world's most technical person, and I appreciate you guys explaining EDI before, but in what ways do EDI or a company like Orderful and iPass work together? Like, how are they friends? How are they enemies? Are they friends? Are they enemies? How do those two different technologies like overlap? And if it is a positive thing, which you guys are here, so I'd assume it is, how does that help out your customers?
Yeah, I can take that. And Mark, I'm sure you've got some opinions too.
Maybe one or two.
I'll take a stab. I think definitely friends. Like there's no frenemy, no enemy concept here. An iPaaS and an EDI provider can play very well together. And the reason for that is the iPaaS is great at API to API connections. Right? If you think about connecting NetSuite to Shopify or NetSuite to Returnly, like whatever these apps are, the iPaaS is amazing for that. What we've done at Orderful is turn what is traditionally a B2B experience with EDI, where everything's custom, into an API to API experience. So if the iPaaS is great at API to API and Orderful is an API for EDI, it's kind of a match made in heaven in terms of working together. Mark, you have anything to?
Yeah, Eric, I think you broke that down pretty well. I often think of this as for so many companies, they're accelerating. They've leveraged an iPaaS to like Sligo or others to get quick time to value and automate their business. And so now their business is growing. They moved into multiple channels. They've automated a lot in order to cash. They've probably integrated to the 3PL, and they reach a certain point in scale. And this could either be a large organization that's maybe moving into new sales channels for the first time, or this is a smaller company that's growing. And we see this quite a bit, where now they've sort of tapped out a lot of their direct to consumer sales avenues, or at least they've gone in that direction. And now the next thing is to start selling their products in directly to like larger, we think of as often big box stores. And so this is sort of the new realm for their business from a go-to-market standpoint. But as soon as they do that, they land that big that big order with Costco or Walmart or whatever it may be for the first time, and then they're all excited. And then there's this, you've often heard that I've had in my consulting past, and I'm sure you did in your consulting, but Eric, they're freaking out. They're like, oh, we have to get this implemented in this amount of time, and we have to meet these standards. And then there's penalties. That's the other thing. Usually when you're working at the scale and the trading partners that you're using to move your data through EDI, you often have penalties if you're not communicating promptly, correctly, on time, if your shipments are incorrect. And those financial penalties can be massive if there's a mistake. So there's a lot of pressure to move quickly. And what I've seen is that EDI is traditionally, like you've mentioned, it's moved so slowly, and then it's very jarring to go from an environment where you can build and integrate quickly, and now you're like, oh, you go to a traditional EDI provider and something takes forever, and you want to bring it in house, but you've got a small team, you've got some capabilities to build iPaaS based integrations, but not EDI, and that's where we found Orderful to fit really well into this paradigm, to help bridge that gap and provide that acceleration that you don't get with traditional EDI or trying to build it yourself. And so the team doesn't need to be as technical.
Yeah, the thing that works really well is Sligo has actually built some connectors pre-built from ERPs to Orderful. And so, these brands that don't have the technical resources that can't actually, write code would rely on the iPaaS for that connectivity. And that's something we've stayed out of traditionally. So that's what makes it a really good match, is like meeting these companies where they are, providing them that kind of last mile connectivity so they don't have to worry about it, and then offering, kind of a really modern and fast EDI experience that they couldn't get otherwise.
Sweet. Thank you. I appreciate you both breaking that down. Sorry, go ahead, Mark. It looked like you had.
I was just going to say, got me thinking about, the key thing there is it's so much work to figure out let's call it the EDI dialect of every individual trading partner. And Eric, you're taking care of that for your customers. That that knowledge of those,
Yeah.
and then on top of it, that AI-based transformation. But how many different trading partners are you connecting to right now?
Yeah,
It
there's
must be
over 10, there's
big.
over 10,000 requirements in the network now.
Wow.
And so what that means is, every trading partner has, their own unique set of requirements per transaction type. So there's about 10,000 of those different requirement docs published. And so when somebody connects to Orderful, they get access to all 10,000 of those through one connection. And that's really, what we're providing is this kind of one-to-many experience. But again, there's no silver bullet to making EDI fast and easy. That's one part of it. The other part of it is we have this validation engine that makes it very easy to validate your data against a requirement. So you no longer have to wait for your partner to email you responses back in testing. You can just test right in Orderful. Another bullet is the rules engine, and now AI applied to the rules engine. So we've layered on all these different experiences to try to make the whole thing really fast and easy.
Sounds like you're keeping Piers very busy. Like to hear that.
It's been a really good 5 years together.
That's good to hear. One question that I'd like to throw in is something that I saw all over the Orderful website is connect once and access all. That's kind of the one to many. And I'm curious how that influences not only your business goals, but also maybe like your technology goals. Like obviously that's a really important concept in iPaaS. It's a really important concept in EDI, but how does, connect once, access all, like how does that drive Orderful?
Yeah, I think from a marketing perspective, it's a really easy way for people to understand what we do, right? Like you can connect once to Orderful and trade EDI with anyone through that connection. I think that's kind of the core of the message. As far as like providing value, we're trying to make EDI a lot easier for companies. So consolidating integrations, having companies do more with less, right? Like the ability to trade with, thousands of partners through one connection versus building thousands of connections, just innately kind of makes sense in terms of providing something that's easier, which equates to speed.
From a technology perspective, it means we got to swallow a lot of complexity, right? Like connect once for, on that side and trade anywhere means there's a lot of work that has to happen on the back end. And so that it is, technology, like there are loads and loads of different, we've had to build our own, the DSL and the rules engine, then trying to automate that and abstracting away different transportation communication protocols, and then what do you call it? Serialization formats, be it Edifact or X12, all of that, that vision to deliver that means that we have to take, an increasingly complex technology problem behind us. Wouldn't have it any other way though, but that's what it means for us.
Awesome.
Also, Eric can have that one tagline that is connect once, trade anywhere.
It does sound good. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, it does. So EDIs, there's been over the years, there's been a lot of different providers have developed in the EDI space, targeted at different segments in it, and I've had a chance to see some of these, and it's interesting because it seems like, wow, this is obviously a big addressable market, but it feels, I remember the first time I worked with it back in the 90s, someone told me, it was like, oh yeah, don't worry too much about this. This is old and it's not going to stick around and it's going to change and something more modern will replace it. As we talked about earlier, that hasn't necessarily happened. EDI stuck around, but it's kind of evolved in different ways. And I see Orderful as an evolution. Orderful plus an iPaaS as an evolution of the paradigm to work with EDI. And it changes the way that gives companies a much different option. But I'm curious, between you, Eric, and Piers, what do you see for the future? When you look into the crystal ball of EDI, do you see it kind of continuing the same? Do you see big changes coming? Something transformational? I'm curious how you think about this.
Yeah, I think what we know is the market is growing 12% year over year. So it's not just a stagnant market. It's not dying. It's actually growing at a pretty fast rate. Every year, more and more companies are using EDI as their core way of communicating with their supply chains. So that's a fact. How it could evolve is through modern tech. And the challenge with like companies adopting an API, or let's even throw this out there, like blockchain. Like we've seen some companies, I think IBM tried to do something in the food supply chain with blockchain. I don't know what happened to that project, but like we've seen some iteration on blockchain tech and supply chain integration. But I think like looking at those examples is like something that's good to learn from is that like the challenge with enterprises adopting new tech is that everybody has to do it. And I think the big challenge with that IBM project is they only had a few companies that signed up to actually try the blockchain tech. And they couldn't get everyone else to adopt it because everybody has competing priorities. So I think that's going to be the big uphill battle is like whatever new tech comes out, we think we're at the forefront of it with, a JSON-based RESTful API. Should be pretty adoptable by most at this point. And we'll continue to evolve with whatever comes out. But the bigger challenge is going to be like, can people actually keep up with the tech, and can these companies, make the time and have the money to adopt new types of technology?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think the way I have often thought about it is, and I came to this realization, is like, oh, EDI is going to be here in another 40 years. I'll be surprised if it isn't. And it'll be big. I think we all just about guarantee it's going to be bigger. And my reason for the thinking around that is where you look at where's the center of like where's the inertia around it, and it's really driven by these fairly large, kind of like from a trading partner standpoint, a lot of these big retailers, big brick and mortar traditional retailers, kind of hold the inertia for this space. And so if to work with Costco or to work with Macy's, you have to communicate with them over EDI if you do your volume over a certain level. That really, that says a lot right there. Like until you have yourself as a company has enough gravity to say, no, we're not working that way, or the industry, enough people say, no, the industry's gone another direction and we won't. Just the power dynamics of the industry, there's no incentive for these large companies to change something unless something radically more efficient, or unless it would somehow like alter the way they could go to market, or give them the ability to better service their customers. And I'm sure they're looking at this saying, well, there's nothing that makes sense. So that means that my way of looking at that is that, oh, we're essentially, until something that is coming from a direction that's changing how those big box retailers and others think about it and approach it, then we're sort of stuck with this sort of somewhat standard. And then it's all about how to do that standard better, like how to do a better job, how to maybe shift the paradigm, how to have a different offering. And that certainly seems like, where the way you've approached it, and I think how we're looking at it as well at Celigo.
Yeah. For companies that want to adopt modern technology, Orderful is there for them, right? And I think some of the limits that we see in the market are there's just a lot of companies that can't use an API, right? And they need a platform like Celigo. And to your point of like, we call them leaders, like these companies that set the requirements and they can force their followers how to trade with them. If the leaders adopted a new tech, let's say a leader said, hey, you must use an API, right? The challenge they face is for their followers is all their followers must adopt API technology, and they may not have the resources to do that. So leader can't actually, it's kind of unavailable for them to introduce new tech to the market because they're their supply chains can't move fast enough to work with them. So you're right. Maybe someday there's something that makes it really easy for both sides to just connect and trade right away. And that's, and that would be the kind of the impetus to change. But until then, it's going to remain kind of the core way of doing business.
Did we just start a new company?
Well, we're working on this problem, of course. Like we are
already working on it.
Yeah, Jordan, if you're interested, you can have a conversation with us after this, like while Mark's not there.
I think that's interesting. It's interesting that smaller brands don't have the technical resources to keep up. I mean, even like I'm no technology expert, but I'm very familiar with APIs and what they do and how they work, and that smaller brands don't have the opportunity to do that. And it's just very smart that the way that you guys have positioned yourself in the market and also plan to go down market. And so I know you mentioned that earlier. If you are going down market to not these massive enterprise companies, how do you plan on, I guess, providing them resources that will allow them, whether it's to interface with you guys or to in the future interface with like using an API to interface with these massive distributors or businesses? Like, how do you guys plan when you go down market to help those smaller businesses succeed?
Yeah, great. I mean, what we're thinking about is like meeting them where they're at, right? They may be like a 3 to 5 person shop that makes shoes or jewelry or whatever it is, and they don't have the technical resources. They probably also don't have the high volume of orders yet from wholesale, but maybe they start trading with a 3PL and start working with a 3PL to pick, pack, and ship their stuff, and then start getting orders from one wholesaler, maybe 2. So these brands don't need the full blown kind of integrated solution. What they need is a kind of a web portal where they can go and handle, like, receive all their orders, be in compliance with their partner, and then kind of manage all of that in one place. And this kind of, like, in the industry, what it's called is web form technology, has been around for a very long time. It's just something that we had never focused on as a company. We were initially focused on kind of this pre-integrated experience and converting people from their existing provider onto Orderful. And now we're looking at going down market and providing that kind of non-integrated experience. You got my intern in the background here.
You're a helper.
Yeah, that's right.
It's smart. You're attacking the problem from both sides. Whether you're small or big, you're making sure that everyone is kind of getting involved in the Orderful platform.
Well, we're excited about that because we're actually going to take a kind of a unique spin on that experience, and it's not just going to be kind of data entry on invoices or acknowledgments or shipment notices. We're going to kind of have like a lightweight ERP experience within our product where you can kind of do, order and inventory management, upload that information, and then disperse it to all of your partners through this kind of central repository. So it should be a really, really cool feature. We're really excited about it.
Oh, that's very interesting. And this echoes like a pattern that I've certainly seen in the lower end of the market where, especially for e-commerce companies, they evolve and they don't have an ERP. So they've actually built out automation early, but they're not using, you consider kind of a more of a full-featured ERP with inventory all in one. They've kind of held that off to the side. They kind of hold their, they might still be using QuickBooks for accounting, for example, but they've gone with an inventory management system, and everything's integrated and centered around that. And they're holding off and often, growing to be, quite a bit larger than I really traditionally saw, having done a lot of consulting around this for a long time, where they might be moving to a modern ERP earlier. They're holding off and they're kind of approaching that stack a little bit differently. And this is interesting. I mean, what you're proposing here, Eric, is really interesting, because I think that ends up being the crux of that model is where is your ERP light functionality going to live? Where are you going to have your order processing, your inventory flowing through? There's certainly a lot of value to smaller companies that are trying to open up those channels. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we see that as a big need, right? Like
Mhm.
like as these companies evolve, their technology stack evolves, and they may not be big enough to even have like a QuickBooks, right? But they need something. So, we kind of see ourselves kind of fitting really nicely in the middle there.
The thing I'm excited about too is that, like, we are an API first company. So if you look at our public documentation, I'm not sure exactly how many endpoints there are, maybe a dozen or so. But like internally, we have, I think it's well over 200 now, and that's because everything we build an API first, and our entire front end is you can think of it as a thin client that is an app that calls our API. So it's often like when we take an API public, all we're doing is taking something internally and just putting a bit of a polish on it and documenting it. And what that's going to allow us to do, like you mentioned, Mark, is like as people are, I don't want to say like ERP is dead or anything that drastic, but like kind of the gargantuan ones are, a lot of folks are taking more, a suite of products or a smaller collection of them. But by having this, this web forms and this kind of ERP light approach, backed by a full suite of APIs, it'll be a more natural migration as you can just integrate various parts of it by using the APIs, and hopefully the transition doesn't have to be as abrupt, and it'll let people grow with us. I'm pretty excited about that.
Great. I love that approach. It just results in a need for more integration. They move best of breed SaaS applications earlier. So
yeah, this is why we're friends.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
That's really cool to hear. And it's just again, I know I say this in almost every podcast, but it's always fantastic having really like technical, specifically focused guests, because I get to hear sides of the business that as a social media manager I don't always get to hear. And so just the way you guys break things down has been incredibly interesting, and just communicated it super clear in a way that me and hopefully our listeners who aren't on the technical side of things can understand. I know we're coming up on an hour, and I don't want to take up all day of your time. Mark, do you have anything in closing before I wrap things up? Any questions, loose ends? Same with you, Piers or Eric. Anything you'd like to discuss before we end things?
Well, I'm just glad we didn't start talking about document type 850s, 810s. So I think we stayed right where we should for an EDI conversation.
I'm upset we didn't a little bit, but
okay.
Next time we'll have you guys on again. This has been a really fantastic podcast episode. This is a little tradition around here, the way that I like to wrap things up. We always talk about serious things, and we always talk about technical things and technology SaaS related. But I always think it's important to have CEOs and CTOs and CIOs and CDOs be remembered as people that are actually people. They're not just technological coding robots who do nothing but work all day. So with that in mind, I'll start with you, Eric, and then I'll transition to you, Piers. Completely outside of work, what are your passions and hobbies and interests for those who want to get to know you a little better?
Yeah, right on. So I love to mountain bike. I love mountain biking. I love road biking, but this summer I've been doing a lot of mountain biking. I recently moved to Lake Tahoe. So I live on the Nevada side now. And then I also spend my time up in Vancouver, which is where I'm sitting now. But both places have amazing mountain biking. And, when the weather gets cold in Tahoe, I'll just come up to Vancouver and ride here. And when the weather's nicer back there, I'll go back south. So, that's just, that's kind of my passion outside of work.
That's
okay.
awesome.
I got to interject there and ask a question. The most important one of the whole podcast here then is cross country, enduro, or downhill.
Mainly enduro, and I love trail riding. I like both the kind of aerobic and the adrenaline sides of it. Although this weekend I went to Whistler and rode downhill, which was so fun. I'm down for all of it, but yeah, I love the enduro and / trail riding.
I thought you were going to say like X Games flips and tricks and things like that.
No,
I don't know what that's called, but that's what I pinned you as.
Not doing that. I don't think Orderful would enable me or allow me to try anything like that.
Well, that's good to hear. And for SDRs out there listening, now you know how to prospect Eric. I'm going to transfer that to Piers. Piers, outside of work, what are you interested in? What do you like to do? What are you passionate about?
Pre-kids, I'd say my biggest thing was a travel bug. My wife and I love traveling, but once we had my son, the first kid, we took a 1-year-old to Ireland, and I was like, nope, never again. We're staying local until these guys can understand what time change is and jet lag and all of that. So I got young kids. I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. My life very much outside of work revolves around them. So a lot of activities are seeing the world through their eyes. My son does scouting. And so I've joined as I volunteer as a scout leader there, and you get to explore the natural world and that sort of stuff. And this is gonna be super disappointing though. Like outside of the kids, what do I do? Because you said you specifically prefaced it with saying you're not just super technical kind of dorks that do that stuff. And unfortunately, what I'm doing with my spare time right now, I've fallen down this rabbit hole of programmable LEDs, and my goal is to make those houses with Christmas displays where everything's all sync to music and programming LEDs. There's some great software, WLED, if anyone's ever curious, look into it. It's amazing what's happened in the last year. But yeah, I'm ordering parts off of AliExpress and soldering things together and building light shows for my house. So I cannot get away from the tech too much, even on my own time.
That's fantastic. My wife just sent me a link to a similar type of product. So maybe if I want to build my own, I'll reach out to you. With that in mind, I just want to thank you guys for both of your time. For everyone listening to the Technology Leaders podcast, I appreciate you listening. If you made it this far, we have some really fantastic guests coming up. Piers and Eric, if you can just stick around for a second, that'd be fantastic. But everybody listening, have a great rest of your week, and see y'all. Bye now.
Thank you.
Take care.